You have no idea how many times I've imagined this." That is what Carter Brooks whispered to his CEO in an empty office at midnight, not knowing she had been standing right behind him. One confession, one moment of raw honesty, and suddenly everything he had carefully built as a single father was on the line. This is not just another office romance. This is about what happens when a man who has spent years choosing safety over truth finally decides to stop hiding. When powerful people try to destroy what you are building with someone you love, do you take the money and disappear, or do you teach your daughter that some things are worth fighting for? By the end of this story, you will understand why courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. Drop a like, tell me where you are watching from, and let me show you what happens when integrity meets impossible choices. But before we get to that midnight confession and everything it set in motion, you need to understand who Carter Brooks actually was. Because the man standing in that office at midnight did not arrive there by accident. He arrived there through 1,000 small choices, each one made before dawn, while a 7-year-old girl sat on a kitchen stool in dinosaur pajamas. Carter's mornings started at 5:30. The alarm on his phone played the same gentle chime every day, the one Evie had picked because it sounded like birds. He would slip out of bed in the dark apartment on Marion Street, pull on yesterday's jeans and pad barefoot into the kitchen, where the linoleum was always cold, no matter the season. The coffee maker gurgled to life. The refrigerator hummed its steady note. Outside, Denver was still sleeping under its blanket of high-altitude darkness. By 6, Evie would appear. She moved through the apartment like a small ghost, trailing her blanket behind her hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. She never spoke until after breakfast. That was their unspoken rule. Carter would lift her onto the stool by the counter, the wooden one that wobbled slightly on the left side, and she would watch him work with those serious brown eyes that saw everything. Scrambled eggs. Toast cut into triangles. Orange slices arranged in a smile on her plate. He moved through these rituals with the precision of a man who had learned that consistency was a form of love. While the eggs cooked, he would pack her lunch. Turkey sandwich with the crusts cut off. Carrot sticks shaped like stars with the small cookie cutter he had bought at a kitchen store on 16th Street. A juice box, a napkin with a terrible drawing of a dinosaur and a note that said something like, "You are braver than you think," or "Today you will be amazing." On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like Colorado, was a piece of construction paper with the words, "Better than yesterday," written in Evie's careful handwriting. Pink and purple crayons, the letters tilted at different angles. She had made it in kindergarten 2 years ago when her mother had been gone for 6 months and Evie had finally stopped asking when she was coming back. The school counselor had suggested mantras. Evie had chosen that one. Carter looked at it every morning while the coffee brewed. In the corner, barely visible unless you knew to look, was a photograph. Evie's mother, Melissa. The edges were soft from being touched. Carter did not remove it. Evie needed to know her mother had been real, had been here, had held her. The fact that Melissa had chosen something else, someone else, a life that did not include being a mother to a toddler, that was not something a 7-year-old needed to carry. So the photo stayed, a fact, a face, a woman who had once been part of their story. By 6:45, Evie would be dressed in whatever outfit she had laid out the night before. She took this seriously. Matching was optional, joy was mandatory. Some days it was a princess dress with rain boots. Other days it was overalls with a striped shirt and a cowboy hat. Carter never questioned it. If she felt strong in what she was wearing, that was all that mattered. They walked to school together when the weather allowed. 14 blocks through the tree-lined streets of Capitol Hill, past the old Victorians with their painted ladies' facades, past the coffee shops just opening their doors, past the dog park where the early risers threw tennis balls into the morning light. Evie would hold his hand and tell him about her dreams. She dreamed in vivid color and impossible logic. Last night, she had dreamed about a library made of ice cream where every book tasted different, and you had to eat your way to the ending. Carter listened. He asked questions. He made her feel heard. At the school gates, he would crouch down to her level, eye to eye. He would straighten her backpack straps and tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Have a good day, kiddo. Be kind, be brave. I will be right here at 3. She would nod, very serious, and then turn and run toward the playground where her best friend Maya was already climbing the monkey bars. Carter would watch until she disappeared into the building, every single day. He never left until she was out of sight. Then came the second shift. The train downtown. The elevator to the 22nd floor. The office that smelled like recycled air and ambition. Whitford and Lane occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on 17th Street, the kind of building that reflected clouds during the day and glowed like a lantern at night. Brand consulting, strategic positioning, the art of making companies remember who they actually were beneath all the noise. Carter was a senior analyst. That meant he was the person everyone turned to when the data did not make sense or the narrative needed a spine. He was good at finding patterns, good at asking the question no one else had thought to ask, good at taking a mess of information and building something clear and true from it. He did not need to be the loudest voice in the room. He just needed to be right. His desk was neat, minimal. A photo of Evie in a silver frame. A coffee mug that said "Dad Jokes" loading with a progress bar that never quite filled. A small succulent plant that somehow survived despite his best efforts to forget it. He came in early. He stayed late when necessary, which was often, but he had a rule. If Evie had a school performance, a parent-teacher conference, a doctor appointment, anything that required him to be dad and not analyst, he left. No apologies. No justifications. He simply left. His co-workers respected this. They knew his story or the outline of it. Single dad. Wife left, doing his best. They saw how he never missed a deadline, never dropped a project, never let his personal life become an excuse for mediocre work. So, when he left at 2:30 to catch Evie's class play about recycling, no one questioned it. When he brought in cookies from the school fundraiser and left them in the break room with a note that said support local education, people bought them. Not out of pity, out of respect. But lately, the office had been different. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken that moved through the hallways like a change in pressure before a storm. It started with whispers in the conference rooms, hushed conversations that stopped when someone walked by, emails with vague subject lines, corporate governance, structural review, succession planning. Greg Whitford was back. Officially, Greg had retired 2 years ago after a minor heart incident that everyone politely called a health scare. He had handed the reins to his daughter, Alexandra, and stepped back to spend more time with his hobbies, which apparently included golf, his cabin in Aspen, and offering unsolicited opinions about how the company should be run. But retiring and letting go were not the same thing. Greg still had an office, still had a key, still showed up unannounced to remind everyone that this company was his legacy, his name on the door, his vision that had built everything they were standing on. People laughed at his jokes a little too hard. They listened to his stories about the early days with expressions of exaggerated interest. They did not challenge him. Greg Whitford was the kind of man who believed his presence was a gift, and most people were too tired or too cautious to tell him otherwise. Carter had met Greg exactly twice. Once at the holiday party 3 years ago where Greg had shaken his hand and immediately forgotten his name. Once in the elevator where Greg had been on his phone the entire time, barking instructions at someone about quarterly projections. Carter was fine with being invisible to Greg Whitford. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant he could do his work. Collect his paycheck and make sure Evie had health insurance and a stable home. But Alexandra Whitford, That was different. Carter had been at Whitford and Lane for 4 years. He had watched Alex step into the CEO role with the kind of quiet competence that did not need fanfare. She did not lead with charisma or charm. She led with clarity. She knew the numbers. She knew the clients. She knew every person on every floor and what they were working on. She attended project meetings and asked the kind of questions that made you realize you had not thought something through completely. She was not trying to be liked. She was trying to be effective. And she was lonely. Carter saw it. He recognized it because he knew what loneliness looked like. It was the way she stood just slightly apart in group conversations, the way she smiled and nodded at jokes but never quite laughed, the way she stayed late in her office long after everyone else had gone home, the light from her desk lamp visible from the street below. He noticed other things too. The way she took her coffee black, no sugar, as if she could not be bothered with preferences. The way she walked through the office in heels that probably cost more than his rent, but kicked them off the moment she sat down. The way she listened when people talked, really listened, her eyes focused and present in a way that made you feel like you mattered. Carter had never intended to develop feelings for Alexandra Whitford. It was not a decision. It was not a plan. It was simply something that happened slowly over months through small moments that added up to something undeniable. The morning she had noticed he looked exhausted and quietly arranged for his project deadline to be extended without him asking. The afternoon she had bought every single box of cookies Evie was selling for her school fundraiser and then left them in the break room with a note that said, "Anonymously donated by someone who believes in public education." The late evening, when she had walked past his desk and seen the photo of Evie and stopped and said, "She has your eyes. She looks happy. You must be doing something right." It was in the way she fought for ideas in client meetings, the way she refused to compromise quality for speed, the way she treated people with dignity even when they disagreed with her. Carter had spent years around people who performed leadership. Alex actually did it, but he was a senior analyst. She was the CEO. He was a single father living paycheck to paycheck in a one-bedroom apartment where Evie slept in the bedroom and he slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. She was Alexandra Whitford, daughter of the founder, the woman whose name would one day be on the building. The distance between them was not just professional. It was structural. It was reality. So Carter did what he always did. He kept his head down. He did his work. He was polite and professional and careful never to let his feelings show. He imagined conversations that would never happen. He imagined moments that could not exist. He imagined walking into her office and saying something honest and true and watching her face change. But imagining was safe. Imagining did not risk anything. Until the night with Helios. The Helios outdoor account was important. A legacy brand that had built its reputation on durable gear for serious adventurers but had somehow lost its way in the age of Instagram influencers and fast fashion. They needed a rebrand, a reminder of what they stood for. The pitch was due Monday. Carter had been working on the strategy for 2 weeks, pulling together data, identifying audience segments, crafting a narrative that felt true to what Helios had been and what it could become. It was Friday night. Late. The office was empty. Most people had left by 6. Carter had stayed because he wanted to get the presentation deck perfect. Not good. Perfect. This was the kind of project that could change trajectories. If they landed Helios, it meant bigger budgets, better opportunities, maybe even a promotion that would let him move Evie into a 2-bedroom apartment with a real bedroom for her, the one with the window that faced the park. He had texted the babysitter, Mrs. Chen, from downstairs asking if she could stay an extra 2 hours. She had said yes. Evie was already asleep. It was fine. He could finish this. The office at night had a different quality. The fluorescent lights buzzed in a frequency that made you slightly anxious if you listened too long. The heating system clicked and hummed. Outside the windows, snow was just beginning to fall, light and hesitant, the first snow of December. The city lights below looked like stars scattered on dark water. Carter sat at his desk, tie loosened the half-eaten granola bar next to his keyboard, a testament to his terrible eating habits. His eyes burned, his back ached, but the presentation was almost there. He could feel it coming together. The opening hook, the emotional through line, the data that supported the story. The story that gave meaning to the data. He was talking to himself. It was an old habit from his college days when he used to study alone in the library at 2 a.m. Talking helped him think. Helped him hear what sounded right and what sounded forced. He was scrolling through images for the final slide when he said it. Out loud, to no one, to the empty office, to himself. You have no idea how many times I have imagined this. Walking into your office and just telling you, and then a voice behind him. Close, too close, soft and curious and completely unexpected. What would you tell me? Carter's heart stopped. He turned in his chair too fast, knocking his knee against the desk drawer. Alex Whitford was standing 10 feet away, barefoot on the carpet, her heels dangling from one hand, her black dress from earlier that day still perfectly intact. The overhead lights flickered. Her shadow moved across his desk like a sundial marking time. They stood there. Heartbeat, breath, the moment stretched and contracted. Ms. Whitford. I thought everyone had left. Alex took a step closer. Her expression was unreadable. Curious. Careful. Something else underneath that Carter could not name. Long enough to hear my name in your imagination. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every conversation they had never had. Every glance that had lasted half a second too long. Every moment when Carter had felt the space between them like a physical ache. Show me. Carter's mouth went dry. He could feel his pulse in his throat. Options flashed through his mind. Laugh it off. Pretend he had been talking about a work presentation. Make a joke. Anything to retreat to safety. But Alex was closer now. Close enough that he could smell her perfume. Vanilla and something clean, not the boardroom version of her. The version she kept hidden under the suits and the measured words and the careful distance. And Carter realized something in that moment. He had been choosing safety for 7 years. Safety over honesty. Stability over risk. Fear over faith. He had been teaching Evie to be brave by showing her all the ways he was not. So, he made a different choice. He stood up, slowly. He looked at Alex Whitford, really looked at her not as the CEO, but as the woman who had bought cookies to help a student she had never met. The woman who had seen him exhausted and quietly helped without making him feel small. The woman who had stopped at his desk and said something kind about his daughter. His voice when he spoke was quiet, honest, stripped of performance. I imagine walking into your office and telling you that you make me forget I am supposed to be invincible. That the way you fight for ideas makes me want to be better. That I imagine Sunday mornings where nobody feels alone. Alex did not move. A small tremor crossed her mouth. Her eyes never left his. Do you think I have not noticed the early drop-offs? The charity bake sale boxes that somehow appear in the break room. The way you look at me, like I am not just a last name. The air between them was electric, charged. Then Alex stepped back. She took a breath. Deep, steadying. Go home, Carter. Sleep. Monday, bring me something that reminds Helios why they started. And do not pretend this did not happen. We will face it in daylight. She turned and walked toward the elevators. Carter watched her go. The doors opened. She stepped inside. Just before they closed, she looked back at him. Not a smile. Something more honest than that. An acknowledgement, a possibility. The doors closed. Carter stood alone in the buzzing fluorescent quiet. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. He had just crossed a line he could not uncross. He had just told the truth to the one person he should have kept lying to. And somehow impossibly she had heard him. She had seen him. She had felt it too. Carter sat back down at his desk. He saved the presentation file. He shut down his computer. He gathered his coat and his bag and the photo of Evie from his desk. He walked to the elevator and rode it down 22 floors to the lobby, where the night security guard nodded at him the way he always did. Outside, the snow was falling harder now. The streets were quiet. The city was holding its breath. Carter started walking toward the train station. His mind was racing. What had he done? What did this mean? What happened on Monday when the sun was up and the office was full and they had to look at each other across conference tables and hallways and pretend to be professionals? But underneath the panic was something else, something lighter. For the first time in 7 years, Carter Brooks had stopped hiding. He had told the truth, and the world had not ended. Monday was coming. The Helios presentation was ready, and Alexandra Whitford had told him they would face this in daylight. Whatever happened next, at least it would be real. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Carter woke on the pull-out couch to find Evie standing 6 inches from his face, staring at him with the intensity of a scientist observing a specimen. "You look weird," she announced. Carter blinked. His back hurt from the thin mattress. His mind was still half caught in the office in that moment when Alex had stood close enough for him to see the small scar on her left eyebrow, the one she probably covered with makeup during the day. Weird how Evie tilted her head. "Like you are thinking really loud." She was not wrong. Carter sat up, rubbing his face. The apartment was filled with winter light, the kind that came through windows and made dust particles visible in their slow dance. The radiator clanked and hissed. Somewhere down the hall, someone was playing music, the bass line thumping through the walls. "Pancakes," he offered. "With chocolate chips." "With chocolate chips." Evie grinned and ran back to her room to get dressed. Carter stood and folded the couch back into its daytime shape, tucking the sheets and pillow into the storage ottoman that also served as a coffee table. Efficiency. Every object in this apartment had multiple purposes. That was the mathematics of small spaces and smaller budgets. In the kitchen, he pulled out the mixing bowl to flour the eggs. His hands moved through the familiar motions while his mind spun elsewhere. What had happened last night felt both impossible and inevitable. The memory of Alex's voice. The way she had looked at him when the elevator doors closed. The fact that she had told him to bring something Monday that reminded Helios why they started. She had not shut him down. She had not recoiled or reported him or treated his confession like a violation. She had matched it. She had acknowledged it. She had said, "We will face it in daylight." Carter cracked eggs into the bowl and whisked them with more force than necessary. What did that mean? Face it how? Face it as in explore this connection, or face it as in professionally terminate any possibility before it became a problem. Face it as in we are adults who can navigate complicated feelings, or face it as in I am the CEO and you are an analyst and this conversation never happened. The pancakes sizzled on the griddle. Evie appeared in her chosen outfit for the day, purple leggings, a green tutu, a striped shirt, and her winter boots shaped like dragon feet. She climbed onto the wobbly stool and watched him flip the pancakes with the concentration of a judge at a competition. "Daddy." "Yeah, kiddo. Do you have a best friend?" Carter paused. The question was so direct, so unexpected that it took him a moment to find an answer. He thought about his college friends who had scattered across the country, relationships maintained through occasional texts and annual holiday cards. He thought about the guys at work who he ate lunch with sometimes but never called outside the office. He thought about the loneliness that had become such a constant companion he barely noticed it anymore. "I have people I care about," he said carefully. "But I guess most of my best friend energy goes to you." Evie considered this while he plated her pancakes and arranged the chocolate chips into a smiley face. "Maya says her mom has a best friend who comes over, and they drink wine and laugh really loud." Carter sat down across from her with his own plate. "That sounds nice. Do you wish you had someone like that?" He looked at his daughter, 7 years old. brilliant and strange, and more perceptive than any child should have to be. She had learned to read his moods because she had needed to. Because for years it had been just the two of them navigating the world together. And children who grow up watching for changes in weather become excellent meteorologists of emotion. "Yeah," he said, "I do." Evie nodded like this confirmed something she had suspected. Then she drowned her pancakes in syrup and began the serious work of eating breakfast. After breakfast, Carter told Evie he had to work for a few hours and asked if she wanted to go to Mrs. Chen's apartment or stay here and do her art projects. Evie chose art. She was in the middle of creating what she called a dinosaur museum, which involved drawing every dinosaur she could remember and writing facts underneath them in spelling that was creative at best. Carter set her up at the kitchen table with markers and paper and his laptop playing a documentary about paleontology on low volume. Then he went into the bedroom, the one that was technically Evie's but held his clothes in the closet and his desk by the window, and opened his laptop. The Helios presentation stared back at him. 73 slides, data visualizations, market analysis, competitive positioning, everything technically perfect and emotionally flat. Alex had said, "Bring me something that reminds them why they started." Carter closed the presentation and opened a blank document. He sat there for a long time thinking about what Helios had actually been before it became a corporation. Someone's dream. Someone's belief that the outdoors was not just a place, but a state of mind. That adventure was not about expensive gear, but about the courage to step outside your comfort zone. He thought about the first time he had taken Evie camping after Melissa left. She had been 4. Too young, everyone said. Too difficult for a single father. But Carter had needed to prove something, maybe to himself, maybe to the ghost of his former life. They had driven 2 hours into the mountains, pitched a tent that took him 3 attempts to get right, and spent the night listening to the sounds of the forest. Evie had been terrified and thrilled in equal measure. In the morning she had seen the sunrise through the pine trees and said, "Daddy, we are inside the sky." That was what Helios needed to remember. Not the technical specifications of their products. The feeling, the moment when you realize you are more capable than you thought. When you take your child into the woods and discover something about yourself. When adventure stops being a thing you buy and becomes a thing you live. Carter started writing. Not a presentation, a story. The story of a brand that had started because someone believed ordinary people deserved extraordinary experiences. He wrote about legacy versus innovation, about how the best brands do not chase trends but remember their truth, about the difference between marketing to adventurers and inviting people to become adventurers. Hours passed. Evie came in twice to show him dinosaur drawings. He praised them appropriately and sent her back out with juice boxes and string cheese. The light through the window shifted from morning white to afternoon gold. Carter's fingers flew across the keyboard. He was not thinking anymore. He was simply translating what he knew to be true into words that might make someone else understand. By 5 o'clock he had something. Not 73 slides. Maybe 20. Images pulled from Helios's own archive. Photos of regular people in their gear, not models, just customers who had sent in pictures from their adventures. A father teaching his daughter to tie a climbing knot. A woman standing at the summit of some unnamed peak, her expression caught between exhaustion and joy. A group of friends around a campfire, their faces lit orange in the darkness. And the narrative. Simple. Direct. Honest. Come back outside. Remember what this was about. You started because you believed people were capable of more than they knew. We can help you remember that. We can help them remember that. Let's start again from outside. Carter sat back. His neck ached, his eyes were dry, but the work felt right. Not polished, not corporate, real. He saved the file and closed the laptop. In the kitchen, Evie had covered the entire table with dinosaur drawings and had moved on to creating what appeared to be a dinosaur city with building blocks and paper trees. "Look," she said without looking up. "The T-Rex is the mayor." "That makes sense," Carter said. "He has the most authority." Evie giggled. "No, because he has the biggest mouth for making announcements." Carter laughed. It surprised him, that sound, the lightness of it. He realized he had been holding tension in his chest for hours, maybe days, maybe years. He knelt down next to Evie's dinosaur city and helped her build a post office out of blocks. That night, after Evie was asleep, Carter stood at his bedroom window and looked out at the city. The lights were coming on. Families were settling into their Saturday night routines. Somewhere out there, Alex Whitford was in her house or apartment or wherever she went when she was not being the CEO. What was she doing? Was she thinking about Friday night? Was she regretting it? Was she preparing her own version of Monday, the professional version where she would thank him for his honesty and explain all the reasons why nothing could happen? Carter's phone buzzed. He picked it up, expecting Mrs. Chen or maybe a work email. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "The work you do matters. Monday, just show them the truth. That is always enough." No signature. But Carter knew. He stared at the message. Read it 3 times. Alex had his number from the company directory. She had texted him. Not about the presentation, not about Friday night, about the work, about truth, about enough. He typed a response, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, he wrote, "Thank you," and sent it before he could overthink. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Sleep well, Carter." He stared at his name on her screen. The intimacy of it. Not Mr. Brooks. Not his last name. Carter. Like they were already something other than CEO and analyst, like they were already beginning. Sunday was easier. Evie had a playdate with Maya that lasted most of the afternoon. Carter used the time to refine the presentation, to practice his delivery, to memorize the key points so he would not need to read from notes. He wanted to be present in the room, to meet people's eyes, to speak the way he had spoken to Alex on Friday night without performance, without pretense, just truth offered plainly. By Sunday evening, he was as ready as he would ever be. He made dinner. He read Evie 2 chapters of the book they were working through, a story about a girl who discovered she could talk to trees. He tucked her in and kissed her forehead and turned on the nightlight that projected stars onto the ceiling. "Better than yesterday," he whispered their nighttime ritual. "Better than yesterday," Evie echoed, already half asleep. Carter went back to the living room and pulled out the couch and lay down in the dark. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow was Helios. Tomorrow was the moment when he would stand in a conference room and present work that mattered, and Alex would be there watching, and everything would either begin or end. He did not sleep much, but when he did, he dreamed about mountains and sunrise, and a voice saying his name like it was something worth keeping. Monday arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after snow. The sky was impossibly blue. The air was sharp and clean. Carter dropped Evie at school, crouched down for their ritual goodbye, and watched her run toward Maya with her backpack bouncing. Then he walked to the train station, his laptop bag heavy against his shoulder, his heart beating a rhythm that felt both terrifying and inevitable. The office looked the same as it always did. The same elevator, the same hallway, the same desk with Evie's photo and the succulent plant. But everything felt different. Carter arrived early, pulled up the presentation one last time and ran through it silently in the empty conference room. People started arriving. The Helios team. 4 people from their marketing and executive leadership. Greg Whitford's old friend Halverson from the board observing as a courtesy. Carter's own team. And Alex entering last, her expression professionally neutral, her eyes finding his for exactly 2 seconds before looking away. The lights dimmed. Carter advanced to the first slide. His mouth was dry, but his voice was steady. Helios started 32 years ago because a man named David Helios took his son camping and realized that every person deserves to feel capable in the wild. Not just elite athletes, not just experienced mountaineers, everyone. You built a brand on that belief. Over the past decade, you have drifted, not because you stopped making good gear, but because you stopped inviting people into that feeling. He clicked to the next slide. The father teaching his daughter the climbing knot. This is Sarah Chen from Denver. She bought your gear 5 years ago when she decided to take her daughter on their first camping trip. She sent this photo to your customer service team with a note that said, "You helped me be the kind of mother I want to be." That is your brand, not the technical specs, not the celebrity endorsements. The moment when someone discovers they are capable of more than they knew. Carter walked through the presentation. Each slide was a story. Each story was anchored in data, customer retention, market positioning, the gap between what Helios was doing and what their most loyal customers actually wanted. And then the strategy. Simple, clear, almost painfully honest. Come back outside. That was the proposed campaign. Take back used gear, repair it, sell it at reduced prices to families who could not afford new equipment. Partner with local adventure groups. Create short films about real people having real adventures. No models, no mountains that required helicopters to access. Just honest stories about what it feels like to step outside your comfort zone. The room was silent. Carter finished and stood there suddenly aware of how much of himself he had put into the work. How vulnerable he had made himself. How easy it would be for them to say no. The CEO of Helios, a woman named Patricia Okoye, with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes, leaned back in her chair. For the first time in 6 months, I can feel what this brand is supposed to be. She looked at her team. I want to move forward. Halvorsen from the board started to speak. Too risky, too sentimental. Alex cut him off, her voice calm and unyielding. Standing still is the real risk. Helios needs this. We can deliver this. Patricia smiled. Then we have a deal. There was applause, small but genuine. Handshakes and congratulations. Carter felt the adrenaline draining out of him, leaving him lightheaded and strangely empty. He had done it. They had landed Helios, the account that could change trajectories. The room cleared slowly. People lingered to talk logistics and timelines. Carter packed up his laptop, his hands moving automatically. When he looked up, Alex was standing near the door, waiting. Their eyes met across the conference room, and the distance felt both infinite and non-existent. They walked into the hallway together. Alex said nothing until they reached her office. She opened the door. He followed her inside. She closed it with a soft click. The city stretched out below them 22 floors of perspective. The afternoon light came through the windows and turned everything amber and gold. Alex turned to face him. You rebuilt them. Carter's voice was barely above a whisper. You gave me the field to do it. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was full. Full of everything they had been carefully not saying for months, maybe years. Full of Friday night and Saturday's text message and Sunday's preparation. Full of the recognition that they had crossed into territory that had no map. Alex took a step toward him, then another. Carter did the same. 2 careful steps. The distance between them disappeared. The kiss was not sudden or desperate. It was a question answered slowly. Like choosing a new language together. Like deciding that truth was worth the risk. When they pulled back, Alex's hands were still on his shoulders. Carter's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Outside, the city hummed its afternoon song. Inside, everything had just changed. We need to do this right, Alex said quietly. Carter nodded. We tell HR. We follow the process. I request a transfer out of your reporting line if this becomes something real." Alex smiled small and genuine. When this becomes something real. They stood there in the amber light, not touching anymore, but close enough to feel the heat of each other's presence. This was not reckless. This was not hiding. This was two adults who understood what was at stake and chose honesty anyway. Alex walked to her computer and opened her email. "I am messaging Janine in HR right now, requesting a review of disclosure procedures, hypothetical situations." She glanced at Carter. Better to ask now than apologize later. Carter pulled out his phone and began drafting a note. Request for potential transfer out of Alex's chain of command if the situation evolved. Not immediate, not disruptive, just prepared, building a bridge instead of jumping without looking. They worked in silence for 10 minutes. Professional, careful, doing the difficult work of integrity. When they finished, Alex walked Carter to the door. "This is not going to be easy," she said. Carter looked at her directly. "Nothing worth having is." Alex's expression softened. "Go home. Be with Evie. I will see you tomorrow." Carter left her office and walked through the maze of hallways to the elevator. His mind was spinning. His body felt like it was vibrating at a frequency slightly higher than normal reality. He had just kissed Alexandra Whitford. They had just decided to try. They were doing it right. Carefully. Honestly. Like adults who understood that actions had consequences and chose to face them anyway. The elevator doors opened. Carter stepped inside. The doors began to close. Just before they shut completely, he saw Alex standing in the hallway watching him. Not smiling. Something deeper than that, a promise, a partnership, a decision to be brave together. The elevator descended. Carter leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out. A text from Alex. No words, just a simple message. "Thank you for your courage today." He smiled and was about to put his phone away when another message appeared. This one was not from Alex. It was from a number he recognized from the company directory. Greg Whitford. His stomach went cold. The message was short, direct, poisonous in its simplicity. "We need to talk about standards, Dad." Carter stared at the screen as the elevator continued its descent. The lightness he had felt moments ago evaporated. Greg knew, or suspected, or had heard something. The storm they had been sensing in the air was no longer on the radar. It was here. It was immediate. And it was carrying the kind of wind that could destroy everything they were trying to build. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Carter stepped out into the lobby. Outside, the late afternoon sun was hitting the buildings at an angle that made the glass look like it was on fire. He started walking toward the train station, his mind already calculating risks and preparing for impact. He pulled out his phone and texted Alex. "Your father just contacted me. We need to be ready." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "I know. Come in early tomorrow. We face this together." Carter put his phone away and kept walking. The snow from the weekend had melted, leaving the streets wet and shining. The city moved around him with its usual indifference. People rushing home from work, couples walking dogs, the ordinary Monday evening ballet of urban life. But for Carter Brooks, nothing was ordinary anymore. He had told the truth. He had done the work. He had kissed the woman who made him want to be better. And now the consequences were coming. The kind that could not be negotiated or reasoned with. The kind that came with the weight of legacy and power, and a father who viewed the company as a family album where his image should appear on every page. Carter reached the train station and descended into the fluorescent underground. The platform was crowded. He found a space near the edge and waited. His reflection stared back at him from the window of a stopped train across the tracks. He looked tired, determined, different than he had looked 3 days ago. The train arrived. Carter stepped on and found a seat. As the doors closed and the train began to move through the dark tunnels beneath the city, he thought about Evie. About the photo on the refrigerator. Better than yesterday. About the lesson she was learning by watching him navigate the world. About what it meant to teach a child to be brave. Tomorrow, he would face Greg Whitford. Tomorrow, there would be consequences. Tomorrow, the storm would arrive with all its fury. But tonight, he would go home. He would pick up Evie from Mrs. Chen's apartment. He would make dinner. He would listen to her talk about her day. He would be present for the small sacred rituals of their life together. And he would not regret telling the truth. Because that was the whole point. That was the thing he wanted Evie to learn more than anything else. That courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing to move forward anyway. It was deciding that some things were worth protecting even when the cost was high. The train emerged from the tunnel into the last light of day. The mountains in the distance were purple shadows against the darkening sky. Carter looked out the window and felt the weight of what was coming. But underneath the fear was something else. Something new and fragile and impossibly strong. Hope. Not the naive kind. The hard kind. The kind that knows the battle is coming and chooses to stand anyway. He was ready. As ready as anyone could be for a fight they did not choose but would not run from. And he was not alone. Alex would be there. They would face it together. That was worth something. That was worth everything. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of cold that made your lungs ache. Carter woke before the alarm, his mind already racing through scenarios and contingencies. He had spent Monday night with Evie, kept everything normal and light, made her favorite dinner of grilled cheese and tomato soup, listened to her excited retelling of how she and Maya had built an entire dinosaur civilization during recess. He had not told her that anything was wrong. 7-year-olds did not need to carry adult battles. But after she was asleep, Carter had sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a legal pad and begun making lists. What Greg might know, what he might accuse, what leverage he actually had, what protections existed, what vulnerabilities needed to be addressed. He worked until 2 a.m, building a framework for survival. Now, at 5:30, he stood in the bathroom mirror and practiced breathing. 4 counts in. Hold for 4. 4 counts out. Hold for 4. The technique Evie's pediatrician had taught her for managing anxiety before school presentations. It worked, barely, but it worked. He made breakfast for Evie. Oatmeal with brown sugar and sliced bananas. She ate while half asleep, her hair sticking up in gravity-defying angles. Carter packed her lunch with extra care, as if the precision of carrot stars and the perfect sandwich could somehow protect her from the storm that was coming. At school, he held her a little longer than usual during goodbye. "Everything okay, Daddy?" Evie asked, reading him the way she always did. "Everything is going to be okay," Carter said, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have difficult conversations. But you are safe. You are loved, and that never changes. Evie nodded seriously, like when you had to talk to my teacher about the playground thing. Exactly like that. She hugged him again and ran toward Maya. Carter watched until she disappeared into the building. Then he turned and walked toward the train station with the grim determination of someone heading into battle. He arrived at the office at 7. The building was mostly empty. Security nodded at him. The elevator hummed its familiar tune. 22 floors. The doors opened. Alex was already in her office, visible through the glass wall, sitting at her desk with 3 different documents spread in front of her and a phone pressed to her ear. She saw him and held up one finger. Wait. Carter went to his desk, dropped his bag, and tried to look like he was doing normal morning work. Checking emails. Reviewing project updates. All of it meaningless busy work while his heart hammered against his ribs. 5 minutes later, Alex appeared at his desk. Conference room 3. Now. They walked separately, 10 seconds apart. the careful choreography of people trying not to draw attention. The conference room was small, windowless, designed for private conversations. Alex closed the door and locked it. The click echoed in the enclosed space. She pulled out her phone and set it on the table, voice recorder running. Then she pulled out a folder and opened it. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, time-stamped documents. "I spent last night talking to our attorneys," Alex said without preamble. "My father contacted me around 7 yesterday evening. He made several statements about you, about us, about what he intends to do. I recorded the conversation. It is legal in Colorado with one-party consent. He does not know I recorded it." Carter felt something cold slide down his spine. What did he say? Alex's voice was steady, but there was rage underneath it, controlled and precise. "He said you were taking advantage of his daughter, that you were angling for advancement through inappropriate means, that he had evidence of you manipulating situations to gain access to me, that you were unstable and potentially dangerous given your history as a single father with custody concerns." The words hit Carter like physical blows. He sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. His throat was tight. History with custody concerns. That was a lie. Melissa had left. She had abandoned Evie. Carter had full legal custody. There had never been a dispute, never a question. "That is not true," Carter said, his voice rough. "None of that is true." "I know," Alex said. "Which is why I had legal pull your HR file, your background check, your custody documentation. Everything is clean. He is fabricating. Or more likely, he is preparing to fabricate. This is his pattern. When he cannot control a situation, he rewrites the narrative." She pulled out another document. This one was older, printed on yellowing paper. A memo from 8 years ago. Carter scanned it quickly. A complaint from a female junior analyst about Greg making inappropriate comments. The complaint had been withdrawn 2 days later. The analyst had left the company a week after that with a severance package. "How many of these are there?" Carter asked quietly. 4 that I have found so far," Alex said. "All within the first 10 years of the company. All withdrawn. All ending in departures with generous financial agreements and non-disclosure clauses. My father built this company on brilliant strategy and questionable ethics. I have spent 2 years trying to clean it up without destroying his legacy. But if he comes after you, if he weaponizes his power to protect his ego, I will burn every bridge necessary." Carter looked at her. Really looked at her. Alexandra Whitford, in a black suit and white shirt, her hair pulled back severely, her expression carved from ice and determination. This was not the woman who had kissed him in the amber light of her office. This was the CEO, the general, the person who had been preparing for this war her entire life. "What do you need from me?" Carter asked. "I need you to tell me the truth about everything. Your custody situation, your financial history, any vulnerability he might exploit. I need you to trust me with information you probably do not want to share. Because if we are going to fight this, we fight with full transparency." Carter took a breath. Melissa left when Evie was 18 months old. No warning, no custody battle. She signed over her parental rights 6 months later in exchange for no child support obligations. I have sole legal and physical custody. Evie has not seen her mother in 5 years. There is no custody concern. There never has been. Alex made notes. Financial. I live paycheck to paycheck. No debt beyond student loans, which I am paying on an income-based plan. No criminal history, no civil suits, no skeletons. I am boring in the most legally advantageous way possible. A small smile crossed Alex's face. Boring is excellent for our purposes. She pulled out another folder. This one was thicker. Janine from HR has been working since yesterday afternoon. We have drafted disclosure paperwork, conflict of interest protocols, A transfer request that would move you to report to our VP of Client Strategy instead of through my chain. Salary review processes that are completely independent of my input. We are building a framework that makes it impossible to claim favoritism or impropriety. Carter felt something loosen in his chest. You did all this overnight. Alex met his eyes. I told you we would face this together. I meant it. There was a knock on the door. Alex checked her phone. That will be Janine and Marcus from legal. We have 30 minutes before my father arrives. He scheduled a meeting with me and the board chair for 9. He thinks he is walking into an ambush of his design. We are going to change the terrain. She unlocked the door. Janine Ortiz entered first, carrying her own folder and a laptop. She was in her 50s, precise and professional, with the kind of competence that made you feel safer just being in her presence. Behind her came Marcus Chen, the senior legal counsel, young and sharp with wire-rimmed glasses and an expression of focused intensity. Janine sat down and opened her laptop. Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you some questions for documentation purposes. They may feel invasive. Please understand they are necessary. For the next 20 minutes, Carter answered questions. His relationship history, his custody arrangement, his financial status, any prior workplace relationships or complaints, any history of mental health treatment, any substance use, everything laid bare and documented with timestamps and notes. It felt like being stripped naked in front of strangers. But he understood why it was necessary. They were building armor, creating a record that could not be twisted or rewritten. Marcus pulled out his own documents. These are communications we have pulled from company servers, emails between Greg Whitford and several board members over the past 6 months. References to concerns about leadership, suggestions that Alex is too soft on modern workplace issues, implications that the company needs a return to traditional values and stronger oversight. He is building a case for replacing you, Marcus said to Alex. This situation with Carter is an excuse. He was already looking for leverage. Alex's expression did not change. Do we have enough to preempt him? Marcus hesitated. We have enough to raise serious questions about his conduct during his tenure. The old harassment complaints, some vendor contracts that were never properly disclosed, a consulting arrangement with a friend's firm that looks questionable from a conflict of interest standpoint. But using this against him means going to war with the founder. That has consequences. I am aware of the consequences, Alex said quietly. But I will not let him destroy a good person to maintain his control. We use what we have. Janine closed her laptop. I have the disclosure and transfer paperwork ready. If you two choose to pursue a relationship, we have a framework that protects everyone and maintains company integrity. I have also documented this entire process in case there are ever questions about favoritism or impropriety. The record will show we did this correctly. Carter felt overwhelmed. These people, these professionals he barely knew, were going to extraordinary lengths to protect him. To protect what he and Alex were trying to build. It was humbling and terrifying in equal measure. What happens at 9? Carter asked. Alex looked at her phone. At 9, my father walks into my office expecting to present me with an ultimatum about you. Instead, he will find me prepared with documentation about his own conduct. I will give him a choice. He can step back from all active involvement in company operations and accept an emeritus advisory role with no decision-making authority, or I will take these findings to the board and recommend a formal investigation into his tenure. That will destroy your relationship with him, Carter said softly. Yes, Alex said, it will. The room was quiet. Janine and Marcus exchanged glances but said nothing. This was not their decision to make. He is my father, Alex continued, and I love him. But I will not let him weaponize this company against someone I care about. I will not let him perpetuate a culture where power means you can rewrite truth. He taught me to lead with integrity. Now I am going to show him what that actually means. Carter felt his throat tighten. You do not have to do this. Alex reached across the table and took his hand. Just once. Just for a moment. Yes, I do. Janine stood. I will be available all day if you need me. Marcus, we should give them space. Marcus nodded and gathered his documents. Call me before the meeting. I will be on standby. They left. The door closed. Carter and Alex sat in the small conference room in the fluorescent light, and the weight of what was about to happen pressed down on both of them. I need to tell you something, Carter said. His voice was rough. Yesterday morning, before all this, I was in the bathroom at home looking at a photo of Evie, and I asked myself what I wanted her to learn from watching me live my life. Not what I wanted her to do. What I wanted her to learn about being a person in the world. He paused. His hands were shaking slightly. I want her to learn that you do not run from dragons, that you can be afraid and still move forward, that integrity is not just what you choose when it is easy. So, if your father offers me money to disappear, I am not taking it. Even if it would make everything simpler. Even if it would protect her from seeing her father struggle. Because the lesson of running away is worse than the lesson of standing up. Alex's eyes were bright. She did not cry, but something in her expression shifted. That is exactly why I am doing this. Because someone has to show that leadership means accountability, that legacy is not permission to hurt people. And if I do not stand up now, I am teaching the next generation that power always wins. They sat there for a long moment. Two people who had found something rare and true in the middle of a complicated world, and who were now facing the price of protecting it. Carter's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Evie had a great morning. Do not worry about pickup. I will get her from school and keep her busy. You do what you need to do. He stared at the message. Mrs. Chen did not know the details, but she knew something was happening. The community of people who had quietly held him and Evie together over the years was still there, still watching, still helping in whatever ways they could. Thank you, he texted back. It is 8:45, Alex said. I need to prepare. You should go to your desk. Act normal. If anyone asks, you are working on Helios implementation plans. Carter stood. What do I do if he confronts me directly? You tell the truth. You stay calm. You do not engage with threats or intimidation, and you remember that you are not alone. He wanted to kiss her. Wanted to pull her close and feel the steadiness of her presence. But they were at work. They were professionals. They were doing this right. So instead, he just nodded and walked to the door. Carter. He turned. I'm proud of what you chose, Alex said. Your daughter will be proud too, when she is old enough to understand. The next hour was surreal. Carter sat at his desk and pretended to work while his mind spun through scenarios. Around him, the office filled with the usual Tuesday morning energy. People grabbed coffee, talked about their weekends, complained about meetings. The ordinary rhythm of workplace life continued while somewhere on this floor, battle lines were being drawn. At 8:55, Carter saw Greg Whitford step off the elevator. He looked exactly as Carter remembered from their brief encounters. Tall, silver hair perfectly styled, expensive suit, the kind of presence that commanded attention without asking for it. He moved through the office shaking hands and laughing at his own jokes. People responded with the slightly excessive friendliness reserved for powerful men you are not quite sure how to read. Greg disappeared into Alex's office. Through the glass walls, Carter could see them standing. Greg was gesturing. Alex was still. Then Alex gestured toward the small conference room attached to her office. They moved into it. The door closed. The blinds came down. Carter stared at his computer screen. He could not focus, could not think. He was aware of his heartbeat, his breathing, the way his hands felt cold and slightly numb. Somewhere in that conference room, Alex was confronting her father, showing him documents he thought were buried, giving him a choice that was not really a choice at all. 15 minutes passed. 20. Carter got up to refill his coffee just to have something to do. In the break room, 2 analysts were discussing the Helios campaign, saying it was the best work the company had done in years, saying whoever led that strategy deserved recognition. Carter poured coffee he did not want and walked back to his desk. At 9:35, the conference room door opened. Greg emerged first. His face was red, his jaw was tight, he did not look at anyone. He walked straight to the elevator and jabbed the button with more force than necessary. The doors opened. He stepped in. The doors closed. Alex appeared a moment later. She scanned the office until she found Carter. Their eyes met. She nodded once, small, almost imperceptible. Then she walked back into her office and closed the door. Carter's phone buzzed. A text from Alex. He chose the emeritus role. Effective immediately. Board will be notified this afternoon. We won this battle. Carter read the message 3 times. His hands were shaking. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had stood up to Greg Whitford and survived. Alex had stood up to her father and survived. But underneath the relief was something else. Grief. Because Alex had just sacrificed her relationship with her father to protect Carter, to protect what they were building. That was not a small thing. That was not a temporary consequence. That was a wound that would leave scars. Another text came through. Do not come to my office yet. I need time. But thank you for standing with me. Carter put his phone down. Around him, people were working, living their lives, unaware that the entire foundation of the company had just shifted, that a war had been fought and won in a small conference room while they answered emails and attended meetings. He opened his laptop and pulled up the Helios implementation documents. Real work, the kind that mattered, the kind that reminded you why you were here. He forced himself to focus, to read, to think, to be useful. Lunch came and went. Carter ate a protein bar at his desk. Alex stayed in her office with the door closed. People whispered that Greg had left and no one knew why. Rumors started. Was he sick? Was there a board issue? Had something happened with a client? At 2 o'clock, an email went out to all staff. From Alex. Subject line, leadership transition. The email was brief and professional. Greg Whitford was transitioning to an emeritus advisory role. He would no longer be involved in day-to-day operations or decision-making. The board supported this transition as part of the natural evolution of the company. Alex would continue as CEO with full authority. Questions could be directed to HR. Carter read the email twice. The language was careful, diplomatic. But everyone who understood corporate politics would read between the lines. Greg had been pushed out by his own daughter. This was not a friendly retirement. This was a coup executed with paperwork and polite language. His phone rang. Unknown number. Carter answered. Mr. Brooks. A voice he recognized. Cold, controlled. Greg Whitford. I want you to understand something. You may have won this round, but I built this company. I have relationships that go back decades. Board members who owe me favors, clients who trust me. You think this is over? This is just beginning. Carter's mouth was dry, but his voice was steady. Mr. Whitford, I have nothing but respect for what you built, but I will not apologize for being honest about my feelings for your daughter. And I will not disappear because you are uncomfortable with our relationship. You have no idea what you have done to her. Greg's voice was almost a whisper now. Vicious. She chose you over her own father, over family, over everything I gave her. That choice will destroy her eventually. And when it does, I want you to remember that you were the cause. The line went dead. Carter sat there with the phone against his ear, listening to silence. His hands were shaking again. The fear that had been held at bay all morning came flooding back. Greg was right about one thing. Alex had chosen Carter over her father. That was a massive burden. A relationship defined by that kind of sacrifice would carry weight forever. Carter put his phone down and stared at his desk. At the photo of Evie. At the succulent plant that somehow kept surviving. At the coffee mug with its stupid joke about dad humor. These were the markers of his life. Small. Ordinary. Real. He pulled out his phone and texted Alex. "Your father called me. Made threats. I am sorry you had to make that choice. I am sorry I cost you your relationship with him." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, "You did not cost me anything. I chose integrity. I chose you. Those are different things. Do not carry guilt that belongs to him." Carter read the message. Read it again. Wanted to believe it. But Greg's words were still echoing in his mind. "She chose you over family. That choice will destroy her." Another text from Alex. "I need to ask you something difficult. Can you come to my office in 10 minutes? Use the side entrance. I do not want this to be public yet." Carter replied yes. He stood up, closed his laptop, walked to the bathroom first, splashed water on his face, looked at himself in the mirror. His reflection stared back. Tired, scared, determined. The same face he saw every morning, but somehow changed by everything that had happened in the last 72 hours. In the bathroom stall, he sat down and pulled out his wallet. Inside was the photo of Evie, the one with the missing tooth and cake frosting on her face. He looked at it for a long time, thought about the question he had asked himself yesterday. What do I want her to learn? The answer had not changed. He wanted her to learn that you do not run from dragons. That fear is not a reason to choose dishonesty, that some things are worth fighting for even when the cost is high. Carter put the photo back, stood up, washed his hands, dried them carefully. Then he walked out of the bathroom and through the maze of hallways to the side door of Alex's office suite. He knocked quietly. The door opened. Alex stood there in the same black suit from this morning, but her hair was down now. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. She stepped back to let him in and closed the door behind him. They stood there in the dim office light. The city stretched out behind them. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "I need to know if you can handle this," Alex said finally. Her voice was raw. "My father is not going to stop. He is going to use every connection he has to make our lives difficult. He is going to whisper poison about you to clients. He is going to make sure people question your competence. He is going to turn our relationship into a scandal if he can. And I need to know if you can withstand that. Because if you cannot, if this is going to break you, we should stop now before more damage is done." Carter looked at her. Really looked at her. Alexandra Whitford, who had spent her entire life carrying the weight of her father's expectations, who had just chosen truth over legacy, who was standing here asking if he was strong enough for what came next. He crossed the distance between them, took her hands in his, held them firmly enough that she could feel his certainty. "I love you," he said. The words were simple, declarative, true. "If your father burns my reputation, I will rebuild it. If he makes my life harder, I will work harder. If he turns this into a scandal, we will weather it with honesty. But I will not teach Evie to run from dragons, and I will not abandon you because the fight got difficult." Alex's face crumpled. Just for a moment. Then she pulled it back together, but her hands gripped his tighter. "This is going to hurt," she whispered. "For a long time." "I know," Carter said. "But we will hurt together, and then we will heal together, and Evie will watch us do both with integrity." That is the lesson. Alex kissed him then. Not the careful, exploratory kiss from before. This was desperate and certain, and full of grief and gratitude and fear and hope all mixed together. They held each other in the fading afternoon light and let themselves feel the full weight of what they had just survived and what was still coming. When they finally pulled apart, Alex walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, disclosure forms, transfer requests, conflict of interest protocols. Everything Janine had prepared. "We need to file these tomorrow," Alex said. "Make everything official. Make sure there is no ambiguity about how we are handling this." Carter nodded. "Tomorrow. And tonight," Alex said, "I want to meet Evie. Properly. Not as your boss. As the person who is going to be part of your life." Carter felt his breath catch. "Are you sure that is a big step?" "I'm sure. I want her to know that the fight we just had was not just about us. It was about building something real, something that includes her." Carter thought about Evie, about how perceptive she was, about how she had asked just days ago if he had a best friend, about how she would read this situation with her 7-year-old wisdom and either accept Alex or see through any pretense immediately. "Okay," he said. "Dinner at our place. Fair warning, it is small and messy, and she will probably interview you like a journalist." Alex smiled. Small and genuine. I would expect nothing less. They stood there for another moment. Two people who had just changed the entire trajectory of their lives, who had chosen the hard path because it was the honest path, who were about to take the next impossible step of bringing a child into the center of what they were building. Carter's phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen, Evie and I made cookies. Come get her whenever you're ready." He showed Alex the text. She nodded. "Go. Be with her. I will text you later about dinner plans." Carter walked to the door, paused, looked back. "Thank you for fighting." Alex met his eyes. "Thank you for being worth fighting for." He left her office and walked through the quiet hallways. Most people had already gone home. The office was settling into its evening emptiness. Carter took the elevator down 22 floors and walked out into the cold Denver afternoon. The sky was turning purple at the edges. The air smelled like snow. He pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Chen. "I am on my way." Then he started walking toward home, toward Evie, toward dinner and cookies and the ordinary sacred rhythms of their life. Tomorrow there would be more battles. Tomorrow Greg would start calling in favors and spreading poison. Tomorrow the full weight of what they had done would become clear. But tonight, Carter Brooks would pick up his daughter and take her home and introduce her to the woman he loved. Tonight, he would teach Evie that courage looks like moving forward even when you are afraid. That integrity means choosing truth even when it costs you everything. Tonight, he would show her how to face dragons. And somehow impossibly that felt like enough. Wednesday morning came with the kind of stillness that precedes storms. Carter had barely slept. He had picked up Evie from Mrs. Chen made dinner and tried to act normal while his mind spun through everything that was coming. They had eaten pasta. They had done homework. They had read their chapter about the girl who talked to trees. And through it all, Carter had watched his daughter and wondered how much of his tension she could sense. At bedtime, Evie had looked at him with those serious brown eyes and asked the question she always asked when she knew something was wrong but did not have the language for it yet. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Carter had knelt beside her bed and tucked the blanket around her shoulders. "We are going to be more than okay. We are going to be honest and brave and together. That is what matters." Evie had nodded and closed her eyes. "Better than yesterday," she whispered. "Better than yesterday," Carter echoed. Now, at 6 a.m, he stood in the kitchen making coffee while dawn broke cold and blue over the city. His phone buzzed. "Alex, emergency board meeting scheduled for 10. Halverson insisted. "Greg is bringing allies. We present everything." Carter texted back, "I will be ready." Another message came through immediately. "Janine will be there. Marcus will be there. You will not face this alone." Carter poured his coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Evie drew dinosaurs and ate chocolate chip pancakes and did homework with fierce concentration. The same table where Carter had sat 2 nights ago making lists of vulnerabilities and protections. the center of their small domestic universe. He pulled out his laptop and opened the files Marcus had sent him last night. Evidence. Documentation. The paper trail of Greg's questionable decisions over the years. Carter had spent hours reading through it all, understanding the shape of the corruption. Small things. Consulting contracts with friends' companies that were never properly disclosed. Vendor relationships that looked suspiciously favorable. NDA settlements for harassment complaints that disappeared from official records. None of it was dramatic. None of it was criminal. But all of it together painted a picture of a man who believed the rules existed for other people. A man who had built a successful company through talent and vision, and then protected it through power and intimidation. Carter closed the laptop. He made breakfast for Evie, got her ready for school, walked her to the gates, and crouched down for their ritual goodbye. "I have an important meeting today," he told her. "But no matter what happens, you are safe. You are loved. And I will be here at 3 to pick you up." Evie hugged him tighter than usual. "Be brave, Daddy." Carter felt his throat tighten. "You too, kiddo." He watched her run toward Maya and the playground. Then he turned and walked toward the train station with the grim determination of a soldier heading to battle. The office was tense. People sensed something was happening, but no one knew exactly what. There were whispers about yesterday's announcement, questions about why Greg had really left, speculation about whether there was more to the story. Carter kept his head down and went straight to his desk. He had 2 hours before the meeting. 2 hours to prepare his mind for what was coming. At 9:30, Janine appeared at his desk. "Conference room B. We set up there. Come now." Carter followed her down the hallway to a larger conference room on the opposite side of the floor. Inside, Alex was already there with Marcus and another woman Carter did not recognize. They were arranging documents on the table with the precision of lawyers preparing for trial. Alex looked up when Carter entered. Her face was pale but composed. She wore a navy suit and her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look both younger and more severe. "This is Rebecca Torres," she said, gesturing to the unknown woman. "Outside counsel. She specializes in corporate governance and founder disputes." Rebecca shook Carter's hand. Her grip was firm and her eyes were assessing. "I have reviewed everything. The board will likely split. Halverson will want to protect Greg because of their history. But the younger members will see the liability. We just need to present facts without emotion." "Easier said than done," Carter said quietly. Rebecca smiled without warmth. "That is why you are going to say almost nothing. Alex presents the governance concerns. I present the legal implications. Janine presents the HR protocols. Marcus backs up documentation. You are there as the catalyst, but not the speaker, understand?" Carter nodded. He understood. He was the spark that lit this fire, but Alex was going to be the one who controlled the burn. They spent the next 20 minutes rehearsing. Who would speak when? What documents would be presented in what order? How to handle objections, how to redirect aggressive questions. It felt like preparing for a play where the stakes were someone's entire life. At 9:55, they gathered their materials and walked together to the executive boardroom. It was on the 23rd floor, 1 level up, accessible by a private elevator that required a key card. The room itself was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20, leather chairs, abstract art that probably cost more than Carter made in a year. 5 board members were already seated. Halverson at the head of the table, gray hair and expensive watch, the kind of old money presence that spoke without raising its voice. 2 other men in their 60s, both friends of Greg from the early days. And 2 younger members, a woman named Patricia Chen, who ran a tech startup, and a man named David Okafor, who had made his fortune in sustainable energy. The generational divide was visible in everything from their clothing to their body language. Greg was not there yet. Alex took a seat at the opposite end of the table from Halverson. Marcus and Rebecca sat on either side of her. Janine sat next to them with her laptop open. Carter sat one chair removed, close enough to be part of the presentation but far enough to signal he was not leading it. The door opened. Greg Whitford entered with two people Carter did not recognize. A lawyer, clearly carrying a briefcase, and a consultant or advisor, a man in his 40s with the kind of polished emptiness that came from years of corporate strategy work. Greg's eyes swept the room. He looked at Alex with an expression Carter could not quite read. Disappointment. Anger. Something that might have been hurt underneath all the rest. Then his gaze landed on Carter and turned cold. Halverson cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss concerns that have been raised about company governance and leadership transition. Alex, you called this meeting. Please proceed." Alex stood. She did not use notes. Her voice was calm and clear, the voice of someone who had practiced this speech until it was muscle memory. "This company was built by my father on brilliant strategy and genuine talent. I have spent my career trying to honor that legacy, but legacy is not permission to operate outside the standards we hold everyone else to. Over the past 6 months, as I have worked to modernize our governance structure, I have discovered patterns that concern me deeply." She nodded to Marcus. He opened a folder and began distributing packets to each board member. Inside were printed timelines, contracts, email chains, everything carefully redacted to protect confidential information but clear enough to show the pattern. Alex walked them through it, methodically, without drama, consulting contracts with undisclosed relationships, vendor agreements that bypassed normal procurement processes, settlement agreements for employee complaints that were never reported to the board. None of it illegal, all of it ethically questionable. The room was silent, except for the sound of pages turning. Patricia Chen leaned forward, studying the documents with the intensity of someone who understood exactly what she was seeing. David Okafor made notes. The older board members shifted uncomfortably. Greg's lawyer started to speak. Halverson held up a hand. "Let her finish." Alex continued. "I am not presenting this to humiliate my father. I am presenting it because we have a responsibility to operate with integrity. These practices ended when I became CEO, but they existed, and they create liability. More importantly, they violate the values this company claims to stand for." She paused. Let the weight of that statement settle. Then she moved to the next phase. "Yesterday, my father contacted me with concerns about a personal relationship developing between myself and a senior analyst, Carter Brooks. He suggested this relationship was inappropriate and demonstrated poor judgment on my part. He was correct that such relationships require careful management, which is why we have already begun implementing proper protocols." Janine stood and distributed another set of documents. Disclosure forms, transfer requests, conflict of interest management plans. Everything Marcus and Rebecca had helped prepare. Everything that showed Alex and Carter were handling this by the book. "Mr. Brooks will be transferred out of my direct reporting line effective next week," Alex said. "His performance reviews and compensation decisions will be handled entirely independently of my input. We have established quarterly audits to ensure no favoritism or preferential treatment. We are following every HR best practice precisely because we understand the stakes." Greg stood abruptly. His face was red. "This is not about protocols. This is about judgment. You are the CEO of this company. Dating an employee, regardless of what paperwork you file, creates the appearance of impropriety. It damages our reputation. It makes you look weak." Alex met her father's eyes. "What damages our reputation is the appearance that powerful people play by different rules. What makes us look weak is covering up problems instead of addressing them transparently." Greg's lawyer jumped in. "Mr. Halverson, we have concerns about this relationship that go beyond corporate policy. Mr. Brooks has demonstrated a pattern of manipulating situations to gain access to Ms. Whitford. We have documented instances of him engineering meetings, staying late when she was working, positioning himself for proximity and influence. Carter felt his stomach drop. This was the attack he had been dreading, the rewriting of innocent moments into something sinister, the late nights working on projects, the bake sale boxes, everything recontextualized as manipulation. Rebecca Torres stood. Her voice was razor sharp. Do you have evidence of that pattern? Specific instances with dates and witnesses? Greg's lawyer hesitated. We have observations. Patterns that suggest observations are not evidence. Rebecca cut him off. Patterns that suggest are not facts. If you are accusing Mr. Brooks of misconduct, you need to present actual proof. Otherwise, you are engaging in character assassination to deflect from the documented concerns about your client's own behavior. Halvorson looked uncomfortable. Greg, if you have specific allegations about Mr. Brooks, present them now. Otherwise, we need to focus on the governance issues Alex has raised. Greg turned to Carter. His expression was ugly. You think you can come into my company, seduce my daughter, and walk away untouched? You are nobody, a single father with a child from a failed marriage, living paycheck to paycheck, suddenly involved with the CEO. If that does not look like opportunism, I do not know what does. The words hung in the air. Carter felt them like physical blows. The shame, the exposure, the reduction of his entire life to a story about failure and desperation. But before he could respond, Alex spoke. Her voice was ice. You will not speak about him that way. The room went silent. Alex continued, each word precise and cutting. Carter Brooks is one of the most talented strategists in this company. The Helios campaign that saved that account and brought us significant revenue. That was his work. The innovations in client relationships that have improved our retention rates, he has contributed to those. He is a devoted father, raising a child alone because his partner chose to leave. That is not failure. That is courage. And I will not allow you to weaponize his personal life because you are angry about your own accountability. Greg stared at his daughter. The betrayal on his face was raw and real. You are choosing him over your own family. Alex's voice softened slightly but remained firm. I am choosing integrity over convenience. I am choosing transparency over cover-ups. I wish those were not in conflict with my relationship with you, but you have forced that choice by making this personal instead of professional. David Okafor spoke for the first time. His voice was measured. I appreciate the transparency here, but I need to understand the full picture. Mr. Brooks, do you have anything to add? Carter looked at David, then at the rest of the board. He had been told to stay silent, to let Alex and the lawyers handle this. But sitting there while Greg tried to destroy his character felt like complicity. He stood. His voice was steadier than he expected. I did not pursue Ms. Whitford for professional gain. I did not manipulate situations for access. I worked late because I care about my work. I bought bake sale cookies because I wanted to support my daughter's school. I admired Ms. Whitford's leadership long before I ever considered the possibility of a personal relationship. When that possibility became real, we immediately involved HR to create appropriate boundaries. We are doing this correctly. The only person who has operated outside proper channels is Mr. Whitford, who tried to pressure me to resign yesterday with financial incentives and threats. The room went very still. Halvorson leaned forward. He tried to buy you out. Carter pulled out his phone, showed the text message log from yesterday. Greg's voice on the recording Alex had made. The threats about custody concerns and career destruction. He offered me a year's severance to disappear, Carter said quietly. And when I refused, he threatened to ensure my daughter knew what kind of father I was. That is not about company standards. That is about control. Patricia Chen closed the folder in front of her. Mr. Halvorson, I have seen enough. This is not a question of whether a workplace relationship was handled appropriately. It clearly was. This is a question of whether we are going to allow founding members to operate with impunity when their behavior creates liability. Before Halverson could respond, Marcus stood. He had been quiet until now, letting the others present. But now he pulled out one more folder. "There is one additional item the board needs to be aware of," Marcus said. "Last week, the CEO of Helios Outdoor contacted us with concerns. A competitor had approached them with strategy that closely mirrored our confidential pitch. We investigated the source. The IP trail leads to a consulting firm owned by Richard Pemberton, who is, as I understand it, Mr. Whitford's regular golf partner and occasional business associate." The room exploded. Multiple board members spoke at once. Greg's face went from red to pale. His lawyer was flipping through documents frantically. Halvorson raised his voice. "Order. Everyone be quiet." Silence fell. Marcus Halvorson said carefully, "Are you suggesting Greg leaked confidential client strategy?" "I am suggesting the board should be aware of this concerning connection and may wish to investigate further," Marcus said. "We have email headers, vendor logs, and timestamps. We have not drawn conclusions. But the pattern exists." Greg was standing now, both hands on the table. "This is absurd. This is a setup. You are trying to destroy me because I dared to question your relationship." "You destroyed yourself," Alex said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through everything else. "I gave you a choice yesterday. Step back gracefully or face investigation. You chose to escalate. You chose to attack Carter. You chose to make threats. Every consequence from this point forward is the result of your decisions, not mine." The room fell silent again. Father and daughter stared at each other across the conference table. Years of history compressed into this moment. All the complicated love and expectation and disappointment that made up a family legacy. Halvorson looked around the table. "We need to vote. 2 items. First, whether to accept Greg Whitford's transition to an emeritus advisory role with no operational authority pending a full investigation into the concerns raised today. Second, whether to authorize the conflict of interest management plan for Ms. Whitford and Mr. Brooks as presented. The vote was not unanimous. Halvorson and one of the older board members voted against removing Greg from operational control. But Patricia David and the third member voted in favor. 3-2. Enough. The conflict of interest plan passed 4-1, with only Halvorson abstaining. Greg stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. He looked at Alex one more time. "When this company fails, when your poor judgment catches up with you, do not come to me for help." He walked out. His lawyer and advisor scrambled to follow. The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. The remaining board members sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Patricia spoke. "Alex, I know that was difficult, but you did the right thing. Leadership requires hard choices." Alex nodded but did not speak. Carter could see her hands shaking slightly under the table. Halvorson gathered his papers. "This meeting is adjourned. Alex, I expect regular updates on the investigation, and I expect no further drama regarding workplace relationships." The board members filed out. Within minutes, only Alex, Carter, Marcus, Rebecca, and Janine remained. Rebecca began packing up documents. "You survived. That is what matters. The investigation will take weeks. Greg will probably leak things to friendly reporters. Be prepared for that. But you have the legal high ground now." Alex sat down heavily. She looked exhausted, hollowed out. Carter wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, but they were still in the office, still in the space where they had to be professionals. Janine closed her laptop. "I will file all the disclosure paperwork today. Carter, you will officially transfer to report to Michelle in client strategy starting Monday. Your compensation review will be handled by external consultants. Everything by the book." "Thank you," Carter said. He meant it. These people had fought for him, had protected him, had made it possible for him to stand in that room and tell the truth. Marcus and Rebecca left. Janine followed. The door closed. Carter and Alex sat alone in the boardroom with the winter light coming through the windows and the weight of everything they had just survived pressing down on both of them. "I just ended my relationship with my father," Alex said. Her voice was flat. "Exhausted. He is never going to forgive me for this." Carter moved to the chair next to her. "You gave him a choice. He chose escalation. That is not your fault." Alex laughed. It was a terrible sound. "Nothing about any of this is simple fault. He built this company. He gave me opportunities. He taught me everything I know about strategy. And I just stood in front of a board and documented all his failures. Because he was going to destroy an innocent person to maintain his control," Carter said. "You chose truth over loyalty. That is leadership." Alex looked at him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Is it, or is it just me choosing what I want and justifying it with ethics?" Carter took her hand. "Both," he said honestly. "It can be both. You can want something for yourself and still be doing the right thing. Those are not mutually exclusive." They sat there in the quiet boardroom. Outside, the office was continuing its normal rhythms. People working, making coffee, attending meetings, unaware that something fundamental had just shifted. Carter's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting another message from Marcus or Rebecca. Instead, it was an unknown local number. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the voicemail notification. He played it on speaker. "Mr. Brooks, this is Nurse Keeley from Evie's school. She had a difficult time at recess. She is not hurt physically, but emotionally she is struggling. Could you come in when you have a chance? She is asking for you." The message ended. Carter felt his heart drop. He looked at the time. It was 11:30, middle of the school day. "I need to go," he said. Alex was already standing. "I am coming with you. You do not have to." "Yes," Alex said. "I do." They left the boardroom together, took the elevator down, walked through the lobby where security nodded at them like it was any other day. Outside, the cold hit them like a wall. Alex pulled out her phone and ordered a car. It arrived within minutes. The drive to the school took 15 minutes, but felt longer. Carter texted Nurse Keeley that he was coming. Alex sat beside him in silence. He could feel her processing. The meeting with the board, her father's face, the vote, all of it. What did she mean, difficult time? Alex asked quietly. Carter did not know. Evie was resilient. She had weathered her mother leaving. She had adapted to their small apartment and their limited budget, and all the ways their life was harder than other kids' lives. But 7-year-olds had breaking points too. And maybe today, with everything Carter was carrying, Evie had sensed it and cracked under the weight. The car pulled up to the school. They got out. Carter led Alex through the familiar halls to the nurse's office. The fluorescent lights were softer here. The walls were covered with children's drawings and health posters. It smelled like hand sanitizer and graham crackers. Nurse Keeley met them at the door. She was in her 50s, kind-faced, the type of school staff member who had seen everything and judged nothing. "She is in the quiet room," Nurse Keeley said. Some kids at recess were saying things. About her mother, about why she left, about how Evie must have been a bad kid for her mom to not want her. Carter felt rage flash through him, hot and immediate. Then grief. Then the terrible helplessness of not being able to protect his child from cruelty. "Where is she?" he asked. Nurse Keeley led them to a small room off the main office. Inside, Evie sat on a beanbag chair, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her face was blotchy from crying. When she saw Carter, she scrambled up and ran to him. He caught her and held her tight. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and wounded. Carter knelt down so he was at her level and just held her, let her cry it out, rubbed her back in slow circles. "They said Mom left because I was bad," Evie whispered against his shoulder. "They said nobody wants to be my mom. They said that is why I do not have one." The words broke Carter's heart. He pulled back slightly so he could see her face. "Look at me, kiddo." Evie raised her tear-stained face. "Your mom leaving had nothing to do with you," Carter said. His voice was steady and certain. "She left because she was not ready to be a parent. That was about her, not about you. You are smart and kind and brave and so loved. Anyone would be lucky to be your mom. But nobody is," Evie said. Her voice was small. "Just you. And you are my dad." Carter was about to respond when Alex knelt down beside them. Evie turned, startled. She had been so focused on Carter she had not noticed anyone else was there. "Hi, Evie," Alex said softly. "I am Alex. I work with your dad. I am also—" She paused, choosing words carefully, "someone who cares about both of you very much." Evie studied Alex with the intensity of a child trying to decide if an adult could be trusted. "Are you my dad's boss?" "I was," Alex said. "Now I am something different. Someone who thinks your dad is one of the best people I know, and someone who would very much like to know you if you will let me." Evie was quiet for a long moment. Then they said, "Nobody wants to be my mom." Alex's face softened. Her eyes were bright, but she did not look away from Evie. "I want to be part of your family, if you and your dad will have me. I am not trying to replace your mom, but I want to be someone you can count on, someone who shows up, someone who cares." Evie's expression was suspicious, hopeful, guarded. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" Alex smiled. "Honestly, no. I burn them every time. But I'm very good at ordering pancakes, and I am excellent at homework help. And I know all the words to every Disney song ever written." Evie considered this seriously. "Let it go." "Every single word," Alex confirmed. Evie looked at Carter, then back at Alex. "Can you do hugs?" Alex's voice caught slightly. "I am amazing at hugs." Evie thought for another moment. Then she leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around Alex's neck. Alex closed her eyes and held her carefully like she was holding something precious and breakable. Carter watched them and felt something in his chest crack open. Not breaking. Expanding. When Evie pulled back, she looked at Alex seriously. "Okay, you can be my person, but you have to actually stay. Not like Mom." Alex nodded. Her voice was steady despite the tears on her face. "I will stay, I promise." Evie turned back to Carter. "Can we go home?" Carter looked at Nurse Keeley. She nodded. "Take her home. She has had enough for today." They left the school together. Carter carrying Evie, even though she was probably too big for that now. Alex walking beside them with her hand resting lightly on Evie's back. The car was still waiting. They climbed in. The driver did not ask questions. On the ride home, Evie fell asleep against Carter's shoulder, exhausted from crying. Alex sat on the other side looking out the window at the city passing by. Neither of them spoke. There was too much to say and not enough words for any of it. When they reached Carter's apartment building, he shifted Evie carefully and carried her up the stairs. Alex followed. Inside the small apartment, Carter laid Evie on her bed and pulled a blanket over her. She stirred slightly but did not wake. He walked back to the living room where Alex stood by the window looking out at the street below. The apartment looked smaller with her in it. More cramped. More obviously inadequate. But Alex did not seem to see any of that. She just looked tired. "Thank you for coming," Carter said. "You did not have to do that." "Yes," Alex said, "I did." She turned to face him. "If I am going to be part of this, I need to be part of all of it, not just the easy parts." "Today was not easy," Carter said. Alex laughed softly. "Today was the hardest day of my life. I destroyed my relationship with my father. I exposed his mistakes to the board. I stood in front of Halverson and admitted to a workplace relationship. And then I knelt on a floor in a school nurse's office and promised a 7-year-old that I would stay." She walked to the couch and sat down heavily. Carter sat beside her. I have no idea how to be a parent, Alex said. I have no idea how to be part of a family like this. My own family was board meetings and business dinners and expectations. This is something completely different. Carter took her hand. You do not need to know how. You just need to show up. That is what Evie needs: consistency, presence, someone who chooses to be here even when it is hard. Alex looked at him. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it? Everything that happened? Everything we just went through? If you could go back to Friday night and not say anything, would you? Carter thought about the question. About everything they had survived in the last 5 days. The confession. The meeting with Greg, the board vote, the confrontation. Evie crying in his arms. All of it. No, he said finally. I would not change it. Because this is real. This is honest, and that matters more than comfortable. Alex leaned against him. They sat there in the quiet apartment while Evie slept in the next room, and the afternoon light moved across the walls. Two people who had chosen the hard path because it was the true path. Who had fought for the right to build something honest even when the cost was everything they had known before. Outside, the city continued its rhythms. Greg Whitford was somewhere plotting his next move. The board investigation was beginning. Reporters were probably already being fed selective stories. The battle was not over, not even close. But here in this small apartment on Marion Street, there was something that felt like peace, fragile, new, uncertain but real. And for today, that was enough. 3 weeks passed before anything felt normal again. Not the old normal, a new normal. The kind built on different foundations. The board investigation moved forward with the slow, grinding inevitability of corporate bureaucracy. External auditors were brought in to review vendor contracts and consulting arrangements. Interviews were conducted with former employees who had signed NDAs years ago. Some of them spoke anyway carefully through lawyers about the culture that had existed in the early days when Greg was building his empire. None of it was explosive. None of it was criminal. But all of it together painted a picture of a man who had believed his vision gave him permission to bend rules that applied to everyone else. Favoritism. Selective enforcement of policies. A pattern of making problems disappear through money and legal agreements rather than addressing them honestly. Greg hired a PR firm. Articles started appearing in business publications about founder persecution, about next-generation leaders who did not understand the sacrifices required to build something from nothing, about political correctness destroying corporate innovation. The pieces were carefully crafted to make Greg look like a visionary being punished for old-school leadership in a new world that had lost its appreciation for results over process. Some people believed it. The comments sections filled with arguments about whether Alex had betrayed her father or saved the company, whether Carter was an opportunist or a victim, whether any of this mattered compared to Whitford and Lane's actual business performance. Alex read every article, every comment. Carter watched her do it and knew she was punishing herself, searching for validation that she had made the right choice, finding instead 1,000 different opinions about her character, her judgment, her motives. Stop reading them, Carter said one evening. They were at his apartment, a new routine they had fallen into. Alex would come over after work. They would make dinner together while Evie did homework at the kitchen table. Then they would eat and talk and be something that looked almost like a family. I need to know what people are saying, Alex replied. Her laptop was open to another think piece about generational conflict in family businesses. No, Carter said gently. You need to know what is true. The rest is just noise. Alex closed the laptop. She looked exhausted. The past weeks had aged her in ways that had nothing to do with time. There were new lines around her eyes, a tightness in her jaw that had not been there before. Evie looked up from her homework. Are you sad? Alex smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. A little bit, yes. Because of the mean people on the computer, Alex glanced at Carter. He had not told Evie the details, but children absorbed more than adults realized. They sensed tension. They heard fragments of phone calls. They understood that something difficult was happening even if they could not name it. Because sometimes doing the right thing makes people angry, Alex said, and that is hard. Evie considered this with her 7-year-old wisdom. My teacher says people who are mean are usually just scared. Alex's expression softened. Your teacher is very smart. Evie returned to her homework. The moment passed, but Carter saw something shift in Alex's face. A loosening, a small release of the tension she had been carrying. That night, after Evie was asleep, Alex and Carter sat on his cramped couch with the pull-out mattress frame pressing against their backs. The apartment was quiet except for the radiator's rhythmic clanking and the muffled sounds of the building around them. I need to tell you something, Alex said. Carter waited. I'm angry, she said. Her voice was low, controlled. I'm angry at my father for putting me in this position, for making me choose between him and doing what was right, for not being the person I needed him to be. And I am angry at myself for caring so much about what strangers on the internet think about my choices. That is fair, Carter said. Is it, though? Alex turned to look at him. Because I also know I hurt him. I exposed his mistakes publicly. I sided with you over him, and part of me wonders if I did that because it was the ethical choice or because I wanted this. She gestured between them. Us, and I used ethics as permission. Carter thought about how to respond. The easy answer would be reassurance, telling her she did nothing wrong, that her father brought this on himself. But Alex did not need easy answers. She needed truth. You wanted both things, Carter said, finally. You wanted to clean up the company's governance. And you wanted us. Those desires existed simultaneously, and when your father forced you to choose, you chose the path that aligned with your values. That does not make it less painful, but it does not make it wrong either. Alex leaned her head against his shoulder. What if we do not work? What if I sacrifice my relationship with my father for something that falls apart in 6 months? Then we will have failed at a relationship but succeeded at integrity, Carter said. And that still matters. You did not compromise your ethics for me. You protected them. That has value regardless of what happens between us. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, Denver was settling into its winter night rhythms, the city that had been the backdrop for their entire story. The place where they had both been trying to build lives that meant something. Evie likes you, Carter said eventually. I like her too, Alex replied. She is fierce and funny, and she asks questions that make me think about things I have been avoiding for years. Like what? Like what it means to stay. Like what promises actually cost. Like whether I am capable of being the kind of person a child can depend on. You showed up at her school, Carter said. You held her when she was hurting. You made a promise and you are keeping it. That is what being dependable looks like. Alex was quiet. Then my mother left when I was 12. Did you know that? Carter shook his head. She did not abandon me like Evie's mother did. It was civilized, a divorce, custody arrangements. But she chose a different life. A new husband, a fresh start that did not include much space for the daughter from her previous marriage. I saw her on holidays and birthdays, formal visits. But she was not present. Not really. Alex's voice was steady, but Carter could hear the old wound underneath it. So when Evie asked if I would stay, she was asking the question I needed someone to ask my mother. And I answered the way I needed to be answered. I will stay. Not maybe. Not if it is convenient. Just, I will stay. Carter pulled her closer. That is why it matters. You are not just showing up for Evie. You are showing up for the child you were. They fell asleep that way, tangled together on the uncomfortable couch in the small apartment. No blanket. Fully clothed. But together. The HR paperwork was finalized on a Thursday. Janine called them both into her office separately. Carter went first. He sat across from her institutional desk while she walked him through the conflict of interest disclosure forms. Every section explained, every signature witnessed, every protocol documented. "You will report to Michelle Chen starting Monday," Janine said. "She is aware of the situation and has agreed to manage your performance reviews and compensation decisions completely independently. Alex will have no input. You will not work on projects where she is the primary decision maker. If situations arise where you need to interact professionally, there will be third-party oversight." Carter signed each form. His hand was steady. This was what integrity looked like. Paperwork and boundaries and the willingness to make things harder in service of doing them right. "One more thing," Janine said. She pulled out another document. "This is a clause about retaliation protection. If anyone in the company attempts to punish you professionally because of your relationship with Alex or your role in the board situation, you have explicit protections. Legal recourse. This stays in your file." Carter read the clause. Someone had thought carefully about how to protect him, how to make sure Greg's threats could not manifest through corporate channels. It was both reassuring and sobering. They needed these protections because the threat was real. "Thank you," Carter said. He meant it. Janine had spent weeks building this framework, making it possible for him and Alex to try. "You are a good father," Janine said. "It was not part of the official process, just a human moment. Your daughter is lucky." Carter felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." Alex went in after him. Carter did not know exactly what was said, but when she emerged 20 minutes later, she looked lighter, relieved. They had done the hard work. They had followed every rule. They had built something that could withstand scrutiny. They walked out of the building together that afternoon. Not touching, not obvious, but together. The January air was sharp and clean. The sun was already low in the sky, turning the glass buildings orange and gold. "I have a question," Alex said as they reached the corner where their paths would normally diverge. She turned to face him fully. "This is real, right? This is not just two people who got swept up in drama and mistook intensity for connection." Carter looked at her. Alexandra Whitford in her winter coat and professional armor, the woman who had fought for him, who had knelt on a floor and promised his daughter she would stay, who had sacrificed her relationship with her father for the right to choose her own life. "It is real," he said. "It is also terrifying and complicated and probably going to be harder than either of us imagines. But it is real." Alex smiled. The genuine one. The one that changed her whole face. "Good, because I just burned down my entire life for this. I would hate to have miscalculated." They went to dinner that night. The three of them. A small Thai place in Capitol Hill that Evie loved because they served her dumplings with faces made from vegetables. They sat in a corner booth and ate spicy noodles and spring rolls and laughed at Evie's stories about the elaborate dinosaur society she and Maya had invented during recess. Watching them together, Carter felt something settle in his chest. This was what he had imagined that night in the office when he had said he wanted Sunday mornings where nobody felt alone. Not the specifics. Not the battle they had fought to get here, but this feeling of being seen, of being part of something larger than his own survival. After dinner, they walked home through the cold streets. Evie held both their hands swinging between them, singing a song about dinosaurs that she was making up as she went. People passing by smiled at them. A family. That was what they looked like from the outside. And maybe Carter thought that was what they were becoming from the inside too. The investigation concluded 6 weeks after it began. The board issued a formal statement. Greg Whitford had been a visionary founder who built Whitford & Lane into a respected firm. However, certain governance practices during the company's early years did not meet current standards. Greg would retain his emeritus title and his financial stake in the company, but would have no operational role or decision-making authority. Alex would continue as CEO with full board support. It was careful language. diplomatic, designed to protect the company's reputation while acknowledging there had been problems. Greg issued his own statement through his lawyer. He disagreed with the characterization of his leadership, but respected the board's decision and wished the company continued success. Neither statement mentioned Carter. Neither mentioned the relationship that had been the catalyst for everything. That part remained private. A footnote that only the people involved would remember as central to the story. Spring came slowly. The snow melted in patches. Crocuses appeared in Capitol Hill Gardens. The light lasted longer. Denver emerged from winter with the kind of relief that came from surviving something difficult. Alex moved out of her downtown condo and into a house in Cheeseman Park. Not a mansion. Nothing ostentatious. Just a 3-bedroom craftsman with a small yard and a front porch and enough space for a family. She invited Carter and Evie over the day she got the keys. They walked through empty rooms and imagined what they could become. "This could be your room," Alex said to Evie, opening the door to a sunny bedroom on the second floor. "If you wanted, if you and your dad decided this was a place you could see yourselves." Evie walked around the empty space, tested the light switch, looked out the window at the neighborhood. "Can I paint it purple?" "You can paint it any color you want," Alex said. Evie turned to Carter. "Can we—" Carter looked at Alex, then at his daughter, then at the empty room full of possibility. He thought about the cramped apartment where they had survived so much, where Evie had grown up on a pull-out couch in the living room so she could have the bedroom, where they had built a life on limited resources and maximum love. This was different. This was space, stability, the kind of home where a child could have her own room and a yard to play in and 2 adults who chose to be there. "Yeah, kiddo," Carter said. "We can." They moved in over Memorial Day weekend. Mrs. Chen helped along with Maya's parents and some of Carter's colleagues from work. It took 2 days to move everything from the apartment and combine it with Alex's furniture and create something that looked like a home rather than 2 separate lives occupying the same space. Evie's room was painted purple with white trim. She had her own bed, her own desk, her own bookshelf. Carter had a real bedroom for the first time in 7 years. Alex transformed the 3rd bedroom into a home office. They hung pictures, arranged furniture, argued about whether the couch should face the fireplace or the window. On Sunday evening, after everyone had left and the boxes were mostly unpacked, they sat on the front porch and watched the sunset over the neighborhood. Evie was in the yard catching fireflies in a jar, her delighted laughter carrying in the warm air. "This is real," Alex said quietly. Not a question, a statement. "This is real," Carter agreed. They had been together 6 months. Not long by most measures. But they had compressed years of relationship evolution into that time. They had fought dragons. They had built boundaries. They had chosen each other repeatedly when it would have been easier to choose safety. "I want to marry you," Alex said. She was not looking at Carter. She was watching Evie chase fireflies. But her voice was certain. "I want to make this official. I want Evie to know this is permanent. I want to choose you in every way that matters." Carter felt his heart do something complicated. "Is this a proposal?" Alex turned to him, smiled. "Yes, I suppose it is." Carter thought about proposals, about how they were supposed to be romantic gestures with rings and careful planning and surprise, about how nothing in their relationship had followed the expected script. "Yes," he said. The answer was simple. Yes. They got married in August. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would end up in magazines or society pages. Just a small ceremony in the backyard of their new house with 20 people who mattered. Evie was the flower girl, taking her role with utmost seriousness. She had practiced scattering petals for weeks until she had perfected the technique. Mrs. Chen came. Janine and Marcus came. A few colleagues from work. Maya and her parents. Carter's brother who flew in from Seattle. Some of Alex's friends from business school who had stood by her through the board drama. Greg was not there. Alex had sent an invitation. It had been returned unopened. That wound was still fresh, still painful. But Alex stood in her garden in a simple white dress and chose to move forward anyway. The vows were short. Honest, not performative. "I promise to make terrible pancakes," Carter said, "and face fears honestly and always show up. For you, for Evie, for whatever family we build together. I promise to lead with integrity at 9 p.m. and live it at home," Alex said. "To protect what we are building with truth. To be the person Evie can depend on. To choose us even when it is hard." They exchanged rings. Simple gold bands. Kissed while their small community applauded. Evie cheered and threw extra flower petals she had been saving for this moment. The reception was a backyard barbecue. Paper lanterns strung between trees. Music from a Bluetooth speaker. Kids running through sprinklers. Nothing fancy, everything real. Late in the evening, Carter stood at the edge of the yard watching it all. Alex found him there. Slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That first night in the office," Carter said, "when I said I imagined Sunday mornings where nobody felt alone. I was imagining something like this. Not the specifics, but this feeling of being part of something bigger than survival." Alex leaned against him. "We did not take the easy path." "No," Carter agreed. "We took the honest one." They stood there as the summer evening deepened into night. Evie was showing Maya how to catch fireflies without hurting them. The lanterns glowed warm in the darkness. Their friends and family filled the yard with laughter and conversation. This was what they had fought for. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, just the right to build something real. To choose each other with full knowledge of the cost. To create a family based on presence and promise and the daily work of showing up. 2 years later, on another summer evening, Carter stood in almost the same spot watching Evie teach their son James how to catch fireflies. James was 18 months old, wobbling on unsteady legs, shrieking with delight every time the lights blinked. Evie was patient with him, gentle. She crouched down to his level and showed him how to cup his hands, how to watch the patterns, how to be careful with small living things. Alex came out onto the porch carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to Carter and stood beside him watching their children. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore an old t-shirt and jeans. No makeup, no armor, just Alex. "What are you thinking?" she asked. The same question from their wedding night. "I'm thinking I almost took your father's offer," Carter said. The truth still surprised him sometimes. "I almost disappeared, took the money, kept Evie safe the only way I knew how." "Why did you not do?" "Because she needed to see me fight dragons." Alex smiled. She did see that. And now she is teaching her brother to be gentle with fireflies. Because she learned both things, courage and kindness. Carter put his arm around his wife. They had been married 2 years, together for nearly 3. It had not been easy. There had been struggles. Alex's relationship with her father remained broken. Some clients had left when the drama became public. There had been hard conversations about money and parenting and whose career took priority when conflicts arose. But they had faced all of it together. With honesty, with commitment to doing the hard work of partnership. And slowly, year by year, month by month, they had built something that felt solid. Not perfect, but real. Evie looked up from the yard and waved. James tried to wave back and nearly fell over. Alex laughed and started down the porch steps to help him. Carter followed. They spent the rest of the evening in the yard as twilight turned to darkness and the fireflies multiplied into a galaxy of blinking lights. James eventually fell asleep on Alex's shoulder. Evie caught and released fireflies until she was too tired to chase anymore. Inside, Carter put James in his crib while Alex helped Evie get ready for bed. The nighttime routines that had once been just his and Evie's now included another person, another rhythm, another pair of hands. "Better than yesterday," Evie whispered when Alex tucked her in. Better than yesterday, Alex whispered back. Carter stood in the doorway watching them. His daughter, his wife, the family they had fought to create. It looked nothing like what he had imagined during those lonely years in the apartment. It was more complicated, more expensive, more work. It was also more real, more full, more honest. Later, after both children were asleep, Carter and Alex sat on their porch in the summer darkness. The house behind them was quiet. The neighborhood was settling into night. They did not need to talk. They had lived together long enough that silence was comfortable, but eventually Alex spoke. "Do you regret it? Everything we went through to get here." Carter thought about the question, about that night in the office, about Greg's threats, about the board meeting, about every difficult choice that had brought them to this moment. "No," he said, "not even close. Even though I lost my father, even though," Carter said, "because we gained this." He gestured at the house, at the sleeping children inside, at the life they had built through honesty and hard choices. "This matters more." Alex leaned her head on his shoulder. The same gesture from that first night on his cramped couch. But everything around it had changed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For being brave enough to tell the truth. For fighting for us. For teaching me what integrity actually looks like." Carter kissed the top of her head. "You taught me that Sunday mornings, where nobody feels alone, are worth fighting for." They sat there until the mosquitoes drove them inside, until sleep called and morning routines beckoned. They locked the doors and turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to the bedroom they shared. The life they had chosen. The family they had built. And somewhere in the city, in an office building that was dark except for security lights, the window where Carter had stood 3 years ago reflected the Denver skyline. The same view, the same glass, but everything else had changed. Because one night in that empty office, a single father had chosen courage over fear, had chosen truth over safety, had whispered his honest feelings to the darkness and discovered someone was listening. And from that moment of vulnerability, everything else had followed. The battles and the victories, the losses and the gains, the hard work of building something real in a world that often rewarded performance over authenticity. Carter Brooks had imagined being brave. And then he had chosen it. Over and over. In big moments and small ones. In board meetings and school nurse offices. In his marriage and his parenting and his work. And the lesson Evie learned, watching her father choose courage, was the one that mattered most. That you could be afraid and still move forward. That integrity was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act honestly in spite of it. That some things were worth fighting for even when the cost was everything you had known before. Better than yesterday. Not because yesterday was bad, but because today they had chosen truth. They had faced dragons. They had built a life on foundations that could weather storms. And that, in the end, was exactly what Carter had imagined that night when he had whispered his confession into the empty office. Not the specifics, not the battles or the pain or the complicated joy of it all. Just this, a Sunday morning kind of life, where nobody felt alone, where love was chosen daily, where courage was ordinary and honesty was the baseline, where being real mattered more than being perfect, and where a man who had once been afraid to tell the truth could look at his daughter, his wife, his son, his life, and know without question that the hard path had been the right one, because they had built this together, not through grand gestures or easy choices, but through showing up, through staying, through choosing each other even when it would have been simpler to walk away. That was the story, not of perfection, but of integrity, not of fearlessness, but of courage. And in the quiet Denver night, in a house full of sleeping children and hard-won peace, that was more than enough. It was everything.